Welcome to all of it. We got all of it.
All of it. All of it.
Our guest is Secretary Madeleine Albright, Bryan Cranston, Tank and the Bangas, Barry Jenkins, Celia Keenan-Bolger, Aaron Lee Carr, Esperanza Spalding, Gideon Glick, Helen Yoyemi, Fab Five Freddy, Benga Akinabe, Brene Brown, Tony Goldwyn, Tandy Newton, Jake Gyllenhaal. Welcome to all of it. Thank you so much for joining us. Hello.
What a pleasure.
Hi. This is so fun.
I'll see you tomorrow.
We're here every day, 12 to 2. Impromptu concert. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I was there for the love of it.
You must tell the truth.
I'm sure everyone's perspective is unique.
There's a lot of truth about the pain of being an immigrant, but they're jokes. We find the funny.
It's our strength.
At what point do you think women's health care will stop being a political issue?
When half of Congress can get pregnant.
Ran out of words, but we do what we do. We don't have no board, so we got to trade twos.
So we trade twos, ours is really dope groove. And Alison, was so nice to meet you.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to our July Get Lit with All of It Book Club event. I'm Alison Stewart. I'm so happy to see so many of our regular book club members out there joining us again. So happy to have you. If you're brand new to our book club, welcome aboard. It's so much fun. It's actually more like a book party than a book club. You'll see what we mean in just a little bit. For those of you tuning in for the first time, I'm Alison Stewart. I host All of It with Alison Stewart, that's convenient, on New York Public Radio, WNYC, every day from 12 to 2. It's an arts and culture show, but at our heart, we love books, which is why we have this amazing book club. And as I mentioned, it's a little bit of a book party. We always have music at our book clubs. Tonight, we're going to hear from Madison McFerrin. She's amazing, and she's got a debut album coming out, which sort of factors into our theme tonight because our author, of course, it's her debut novel. But you need to stay all the way to the end because we announce our August book as well. But without any further ado, let's get started. Zakiya Dalila Harris was an editorial assistant and then assistant editor in book publishing in New York. Luckily for all of us, she decided to make a different choice and follow her dreams and write a novel. And boy, did she ever. The result is The Other Black Girl. It sparked a massive bidding war. It's already set to be adapted to the screen by Hulu. It's a New York Times bestseller. And thanks to our partners at the New York Public Library, get this, 7,333 of you checked out an e-copy of the book to read along with us. So we are thrilled to welcome Zakiya Dalila Harris to have a conversation about her novel, The Other Girl. Hi, Zakiya.
Hi. Oh my gosh, 7,000 plus. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here. And thank you, Alison and WNYC. I'm such a big fan of yours and of WNYC in general and have been since I moved here. So this is surreal talking to you right now.
I want to know, when you were at your desk, did you have like a little moleskin notebook? And were you just scribbling away things you saw in this publishing house?
You know, it's funny. I was scribbling things away mostly on my letterhead, to be honest with you. I was using the supplies. I actually still have like 8 notepads from that time there. I hate wasting paper. So I was scrolling away. Yeah, all those things I was witnessing and the funny quirks and all of it. It was just, there's a lot to talk about.
What did you think when there turned out to be this massive bidding war for this book in publishing, which, pardon the pun, it's sort of an unedited view of publishing, shall we say? What did you think when this bidding war started about this book, about this side of publishing?
Well, first of all, I love puns, so thank you, especially publishing puns. No, I mean, I was blown away. I really was blown away. I mean, when I was writing it, I definitely had thoughts at first, like, is publishing ready for this? And I did have one agent say, love the story, but maybe change the industry. And, you know, I thought there'd be a lot of that. But thankfully, you know, my agent saw it and saw what I was trying to do, and other publishing houses did the same. And it was really, really something to talk to multiple people, including where I had worked, about the book and how people saw themselves or saw parts of themselves or coworkers in the pages.
Now, did you leave your job to finish the novel? Had you started the novel while you were at your job? What's the timeline?
Yeah. So I started writing it in, January 2019. And that was when I started. And it was one of those things that I kept going back to in the morning, staying up late, writing on the notepads at work when I should have been doing other things, all of those things. And then after a few months, I put in my notice because I was like, you know what, I need to see this through. If it crashes and burns, fine. But like, I've always wanted to be a writer since I was a kid. So that was the dream that I really wanted to do, and now I'm so happy I did, because right after I sold the book, of course, the pandemic hit last year, actually. The timeline is just, it's pretty wild.
It is pretty wild. Everybody who's watching, we're going to take audience questions in a little bit, so jot yours down on your napkin or letterhead, and
Yes.
we'll pose these in a little while. Well, let's dive in. How did you get this idea for this phenomenon of the other Black girl?
Yes. Well, I'll say that the title itself, The Other Black Girl, the OBG actually comes from a joke my friend and I would make whenever we were the two Black girls at a party, and we saw another Black woman there. She would often be just the OBG, the other Black girl who's always at the same parties, and so it came out of this kind of joke, but also, of course, the acknowledgement that I've always made throughout my life. Whenever I'm in a space as the only one or one of very few, I do often clock the other person or nod, just a kind of acknowledgement. That's what I was raised to do. And so I was really interested in that dynamic. But then, of course, also the other dynamic of the fact that there can only be one of us, which is a joke that we make a lot of times. Like if we're watching a horror movie and there's a Black person, depending on when the movie was made, that Black person, you're like, of course they're going to die first, or if there are two Black people, so there are all these like inside jokes that we have that we don't really talk about publicly, so it was really fun to explore that and explore the push-pull between, right, like there could only be one of us, but then also we're supposed to help each other and move forward together.
Let's discuss Black hair up front. So there have been movies about Black hair, books about Black hair, poems about Black hair.
Yes.
It's a political statement. It's a signal of identity. How did you decide that the way these other Black girls would be converted would be through hair care products? and what is what does that conversion symbolize?
Yeah, so it's really funny because that idea, that specific of the agent changing them, came from a conversation with my partner. And I had laid out all of the dynamic between Nella and Hazel. I knew that hair would be the thing that Nella was immediately drawn to about Hazel, because I also think there is a signaling that happens, especially as a Black woman, to wear your hair natural in a very white workplace, especially when like publishing. That is a political statement, a really powerful thing. So Nella immediately, of course, recognizes a kinship in Hazel's dreadlocks. But I was trying to work out, I knew who was going to be behind this, what was happening to the young Black woman in the book, but I wasn't exactly sure what it would be. And he was like, what about the hair grease? And I was like, so mad that I hadn't thought of it myself. And I thought about why I haven't thought about it. And it's because it's such a big part of my day-to-day. I don't even think about how much time I spend looking at products and talking about hair and tying my hair back and braiding it and all of those things. They're so ingrained in us, or at least in me. And so after that, it was so easy, because it really is that thing that goes undetected, I guess I'd say, even though we know it. But you know what I mean? It's always there, but I'm not always thinking about it.
My brain went straight to hair relaxers and going for European beauty standards.
Yes.
All those little girls, you had your head over the back of the sink and somebody's putting it in your hair and it burns.
The creamy crack. And that's another thing too. As a young person, I was so defined by my hair. I remember as a young Black girl growing up mostly around white people, wanting to have straight hair, and being my friends who could take showers and then come out of the shower and their hair would just dry. Everything would be fine. And like, how is that possible? I had to sit down with a blow dryer. I had to, they're nuts. It's all just so much. And so definitely that was a big thing too, how we condition ourselves to fit into these boxes, because that's really what a lot of these characters are facing in this book.
Yeah, let me read a passage of Nella, since we're talking about trying to fit it in boxes. This is from page 211. Nella had kept her mouth shut, slowly but surely, in the hopes of making the ride a bit smoother, in the hopes of getting a promotion. She'd accepted every excuse. She picked her battles, if she dared pick any wisely. After all, that was what she'd been taught, to stand still for so long that when you started to run, they'd be dumbfounded that they wouldn't even follow. Well, that was what Nella had been doing, standing still. And now here was Hazel, miles ahead.
Yeah.
So what does Hazel's arrival actually signal about the people who are around Nella, that they immediately gravitate towards Hazel after Nella's been putting in all the hard work? And then what does it do to Nella's self-confidence?
Yeah. I mean, Hazel is this perfect depiction, at least according to a lot of people's standards. I was thinking, especially where we are now in the moment as a country and as the world, what we see as Blackness. And so Hazel is very in vogue. Hazel says all the right things. She has the really cool hair, but she also speaks up. She's able to do all of these things that Nella didn't think a young Black woman could do at the same time while working at Wagner Books. So in a lot of ways, Nella is so curious about that, because Nella is very anxious in her head all the time, really thinking about playing the long game, thinking, all right, well, if I stay here long enough, I can bring other people in, I can get my promotion, and I will not have to rock the boat. But Hazel is working much more radically and is able to do certain things that Nella is like, wait a minute, but I did this first. I broke all of these people in. I was the nice one. And that really, to me, in a lot of ways represents, I think, the conversations we've always been having about the best ways to move forward. And everyone has their own kind of idea of what progress looks like and how to move ahead. Some people do want to just say what's on their minds and speak their truth, and I think that's beautiful and important, but not everyone also feels comfortable doing that for various reasons. You have a job, you have a family, you need to support yourself. You do have a goal at the end that you want to make, so it's just a lot to negotiate, and it was really fun to explore it through Nella and Hazel.
When you were creating Hazel, what little hints or attitudes or phrases did you decide to drop that would set off Nella's radar? Because Nella's not sure from the beginning. There's something nagging at Nella about Hazel, and she's trying to talk herself out of it's just jealousy. But she, in her gut knows there's something that's a little bit off. What were some of those details that you wanted to drop?
Yeah, I mean, one thing right off the bat, so I was really interested while writing, thinking about my own time, my first few weeks in publishing, and how nervous I was to mess anything up, because it was so hard to get that job. And so the interaction between Nella and Hazel when they first meet, and they're with Vera and Maisie in the office, and Nella kind of assumes that she and Hazel will have this kind of oh man, these two white women, listen to them go on and on. But Hazel's actually engaged in it, and Nella's like, wait a minute, I kind of thought we would have a moment. So those kind of things where Nella is really expecting certain things out of Hazel, because Nella has gotten so used to her own trajectory there and thinks that Hazel will have the same experience. And yeah, just those intimate moments where Nella has this prediction and her own prejudices, frankly, where they all just get tied down. Especially another example is, I can give spoilers, right?
Yeah, that's already read the book.
Yeah, the conversations about Hazel talking about her civil rights background, and how she kind of moves between, 1 minute she's like, speak your truth, and then another minute she's like going back on that, and all of those contradictions. Those are just a few examples, I think.
We asked our readers, we have our Instagram polls, it's at all of it, WNYC. You can also leave your questions there, by the way. But we asked our readers if they thought of Hazel as a pure villain. 59% said no, and 41% said yes.
Wow, that's so close.
It is so close. How do you see Hazel? Is she a villain?
You know, I see Hazel as a product of her environment. There's definitely some villainry there, because there is her drive to be the only one. But a lot of it is not her fault necessarily. Part of it is the grease. But the other part is, of course, white supremacy and these needs to kind of meet, we're talking about checking boxes, but to try to check all of the boxes. That is something that we have been trying to do for a very long time, to no avail, and we're damned if we do sometimes, and we're damned if we don't. And I really do see her as doing the best she can. Now, am I a Hazel? I like to think I'm not. I don't want to be. But I do think, just as Kendra Ray, too, is a kind of a product of her time and of what values she was given as a young person, and what values she was just seeing were actually being effective at having as a young Black woman in America. I think Hazel's very similar, where she's trying to make it work. So yeah, but I could see the other side too.
Let's bring in some of the other characters to talk about. Owen, for a minute, why did you feel what did it add for you and add for your story to make Owen, Nella's boyfriend, white?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it really added another layer of complexity. Wagner, all of her coworkers there are white, of course, and there are a lot of things, a lot of problematic things said, a lot of faux pas and all of those things. So I really wanted to show this other part of Nella that is not that is more of a safe space, that is not in the workplace. And also how then he compares with Malika, and how there are they really represent to me these two parts of Nella that she's constantly trying to just negotiate, well, I should speak out more, but also I do want to have stability like Owen does. I do want to have this, but of course Nella can never be Owen because Owen's a white man. So all of those complexities that I was really invested in showing, just all of the ways in which we are complex and the ways in which we are so nuanced and have to really figure out what's good, what's bad, all of that.
Malika is a friend I think anybody'd like to have. I'd like to have Malika as a friend. I could use a Malika every now and again.
Yes.
What does Malika see in Nella that Nella doesn't see in herself?
That's such a good question, by the way. I haven't thought about this one. I mean, Malika sees someone who is, I think, too hard on herself. I mean, Nella sees that for sure, but Malika definitely sees it, and also sees that Nella is also trying her best, and kind, and probably would do better speaking her truth a little bit more and having a little more perspective on her job at Wagner, because Malika has this job with this fitness guru. She has a very different outlook on life, but she also has a little more freedom in other ways to speak up. And so I really wanted to show that dynamic too, because it's so real when you have a friend who is working at another job where it's the rules are different. You're able to have a little more relaxed conversations and be yourself a little bit more. And so I really wanted to show that comparison as well.
And reminder to everybody watching, in about 5-10 minutes, we're going to get to your questions. You can put them right in the chat. You can also go to our Instagram at allofitWNYC if you want to leave a message there. You can do that as well, a question. So let's talk about this pins and needles. This is central to the story. So there's this manuscript that's got this hideously racist character injected into it. It's about the opioid epidemic. The character is supposed to be introduced to create more diversity within the book. Did you witness, not particularly something this horrific, but did you witness this in publishing when you were there?
No, thankfully that storyline has not happened to me. Thankfully. But I mean, there were other kind of smaller things that were still, of being the person who notices something and wondering if you should speak up, or being the person who's brought on to see if this is offensive, which is another thing. I mean, sensitivity reads, don't get me started, but that's another rabbit hole. But yeah, that feeling of, again, being a young person and really wanting to, speak up and not be the person who's like slammed on Twitter. People find out, that you were the Black person who let this happen. That's a lot of pressure for someone to have and try to decide like how much they want to push back and if that's right for them. So yeah, that was definitely a fun thing to dream up, but a very easy thing to dream up, which I think is pretty telling.
I'm going to make us go down that rabbit hole for a minute. What are the pros of sensitivity reads and what are the cons?
Yeah, I mean, I think the pros are, first and foremost, I do think it's good that someone is thinking about the fact that there might be some kind of problem with this, or they're not even a problem. I don't think they always need to happen when someone is flagging something, but I do think it just means that, at least I think the purpose of them should be to make sure that whatever the content is speaking to more than one person, I think is sometimes, well, not sometimes, very often important, because a lot of times books are centering the white reader over other people. But I also think using language and the ways language is used in certain books, I think that's also something that could be really helpful with a sensitivity reader to kind of parse out and maybe talk about these things. The negatives, I think, my biggest thing about them is that it just puts a lot of weight and pressure we've been talking about on a person to represent everybody, because again, like in this book, everyone has different lines in the sand, and so putting that on one person or even two people, and then asking to kind of get permission, like it gets a little sticky to me, and I really think that it's a case-by-case situation where I would appreciate a sensitivity read.
We've talked so much about Nella and Hazel, but the book actually starts with Kendra Ray Phillips fleeing the city. Was that always the original structure?
No. That first chapter I started of Nella at her cubicle, that was what I wrote in my cubicle for the very first time. So that came after.
Why did you decide that was the way you wanted to start?
Well, there's a few different things. When I started the book initially, it was just Nella. It was just her character, and Kendra Ray and Diana were in her head and part of Wagner, but we didn't really get to see them. And after I wrote that first draft, I was like, we need to hear these women going through these things, because Nella's romanticizing a lot of what happened at Wagner when that's never the case. It's never as good as it seems. There's always more complexity. It's always more complicated than what you see in the history books. So it was really fun to go back, and I just immediately, I think that's even one of the first scenes I wrote after deciding to do these first person moments, and it just made so much sense in the beginning, because I really also wanted to signal to the reader there is something creepy and disturbing and confusing going on. We're going for it.
We don't really ever learn all that much about the resistance.
Yes.
What went into that decision?
It was hard. Excuse me. It was really hard because I do love underground, like conspiracies and all of those things, but I really wanted it to be more about Nella. They really were speaking to, in my mind, the resistance in the story to the OBGs. And I knew if I gave too much of those other storylines, I just didn't want Nella to get lost, because there's so much going on already. But that being said, I'm always thinking about the resistance and like what they're up to, all the codes and all that stuff. I just love that kind of thing.
What is the biggest difference between the finished novel and the novel that you originally had in your mind?
Oh, well, what is the biggest difference? That's it's also a really good question. I think that the biggest difference that jumps out to me right away is the fact that Shawnee and Nella actually met in the first book that I wrote. So that happened, and you know, story-wise, it didn't feel as satisfying having that happen. And I know people will probably disagree with me and wish that they had met and wish that Nella had gotten out. I feel like my dad is one of those people. But for me, I really wanted to have Nella kind of just in the dark. It was just more fun for me. And I thought, again, realistic of how much, you know, we never know the full story kind of thing. So that's the biggest change. But yeah, and I was thinking about Kendra Ray and Shani. You know, Kendra Ray and Diana was, her responsibility, I think, also increased when I wrote the next draft, because I didn't want it to be evil white man at the top. I mean, I knew she would be, because we have that, you know, that's so real. I knew Diana would be involved in the first draft, but I really wanted to make it clear what her involvement looks like. And that was thanks to my agent, my editor, so many great eyes that were looking at my work really early.
Let's get to some questions from our audience. This is from Wendy. I'm curious to know from the author, if her book had a soundtrack, what would be some of the artists featured on it? What could be the theme song for The Other Black Girl?
That's so funny. It does have, I mean, it's not a soundtrack, but I made a playlist, actually. It's on Spotify, The Other Black Girl playlist. The theme song, I mean, there's so many songs on it that, for me, kind of represent all of them, but I think I'm Every Woman by Shaka Khan is like, because they are, I mean, first of all, I wanted to show, of course, all of the complexities and the nuances of Black women. We are not a monolith. We are also different. And we also have to show up in so many ways all the time, and constantly figure out how much to show up. And so I think I'm Every Woman would be one. But I definitely think, I think I included also Curtis Mayfield on this playlist. It's terrible, I don't remember, but really also anything by Curtis Mayfield. But that's just because I love Curtis Mayfield. So
This is from Linnea. I love the book. When you came up with the story first, did you always know it would be a thriller with sci-fi tinges?
Ooh, yes. Thank you for that question, Linnea, and thank you for reading. I did. That is me. It's all me. I'm so into sci-fi and horror, the Twilight Zone, Get Out, of course, Night of the Living Dead. So I knew that Nella and Hazel, with their relationship, one of them would be off. Originally, I thought Hazel was a robot. Then I thought that was maybe a little too on the nose. So definitely, I did know. But it took some work. It took a lot of work, actually, to get to where I felt like I would be, hopefully, grouping the readers.
Oh, it's way scarier that she's not a robot.
Yeah.
Way scarier.
Right. It'll also have the Stepford Wives. So, like, we don't, yeah.
Let's go to Sachi. I don't know if this is our Sachi, but if it is, Sachi, we miss you if it is Sachi. Sachi wants to know, did you think about a happier ending before you landed on this one?
That's also a really good question. Thank you, Sachi. I didn't, I can actually be like a pretty, like I'm an upbeat person usually, but like I love true crime. I love endings that are really frustrating. And I really wanted a scary ending. I really wanted to show, after going through all of this with Nella, her trying to make it work and not being able to, just how far she would go to make it work. This has been her dream. And she put so much investment into it that it felt like too much to just throw it all away. And I think that's a really realistic reaction is of wanting to just, you know what, if there's a way I can tune all of this garbage out, tune out the news that is stressing me out, and still be able to keep working and do the thing I love and hopefully help other Black people into this space, that's what she does. And I also wanted to make people uncomfortable and like sit with it and like talk about it, because I think if she had come out unscathed, it'd be like, oh, okay, like we don't need to worry about any of this kind of thing. I mean, not really, but you know what I mean? It's just, there's more directive to kind of figure out how could this have been different? How could we have saved her?
Yeah, there's a lot more texture to it, I think. The
hair pun.
Hair pun. So it's so interesting you brought that up because we asked, this is one of our first times it's ever been split down the middle on our Instagram polls.
Yeah.
We asked our readers where they had understanding and sympathy for Nella's ultimate decision. It was a true 50-50 split.
Wow.
What do you think about that?
I think that sounds about right from what I'm what I hear from people. I think that just shows how hard that decision is. I think that's really interesting, but it just proves exactly what I wanted. It's so hard to judge her for it, and I mean we should, but also understanding where that's coming from I think is key too.
We're getting so many questions about this being on screen.
Yes.
Megan started in publishing as an EA, loved the book. If you had it your way, who plays Nella and Hazel in the adaptation? People want to know. Melissa wants to know, how involved will you be in the adaptation?
Yeah, I'm so bad at actresses and actors' names and all of that. So that is something that I am still figuring out in my mind. I mean, immediately I thought of Keke Palmer. I think she could be either of them, to be honest, because I also think Nella and Hazel are very similar in some ways. The ambition, all of those things. So I could see Keke Palmer. I could see, I also say the Kiki Lane, who is in The Old Guard, and I think she was in The New Coming to America too. She would be, I think, a really great Nella. I just could see that kind of quiet fire in her as an actress, even though, again, I don't know actresses. But I think it would be cool to have some new faces too, though, and some new talent. So, and I am co-writing the show with Rashida Jones. Yeah.
That's so great.
Yeah, so I'm very involved. When I love it. I love being able to just like dig in and pull everybody back and just see like more of their stories, more of them, and also just thinking about music and outfits and hair.
Well, when you're done with Rashida there, she needs to go play the lead in The Vanishing Half.
I mean, I agree.
Good. She'd be really good. I do want to ask a serious question about publishing.
Yeah.
You've lived through publishing.
Yes.
You've been on the inside. What's something that could really make a difference in terms of diversity and inclusion? Even if it's a small thing, what is something that could really change the culture, the environment, and who gets to do these important jobs of greenlighting books that create images that people read about other people?
Yeah. I think the first, I have two things that I think are essential. The first one I say is pay, because pay is really, I mean, to live in New York and work at a publishing house means to often have help from other people, which everyone does not have, or to have another job. And so I think that the fact that it is not paying very well, or at least it wasn't when I was there, I think that's a big problem that just logistically needs to be fixed. But the thing I would say is just looking at a broader pool of people to hire, because a lot of it is who you know. And I will admit here that I got into publishing because of a professor I took in my MFA program who knew a Black woman who worked in publishing, who was able to work through. It was a whole kind of like, all the pipes. And then I got an informational interview after applying for years to get an internship or get in for an interview. So that was how I got in. And oftentimes there are, when someone's someone is looking for a new hire, they will ask, do you know anybody? And the person they're asking is a white person, and the person that person knows is oftentimes a white person. And then that's who that gets the interview and then gets the job. And I think that pipeline is a big part of why it's not that diverse, because it is very much looking not broad enough. And so I think that making sure that people are looking to hire outside of the usual places, I think as long as you have a love of books, a love of reading, and you like talking to people, because a lot of it's also just being kind and patient and understanding people, you can do that job. You can do a lot of jobs, I think, with just having those things and having the open-mindedness to teach someone how to do these things. I think that's really important too.
I want to get, for our last question, advice for somebody. There's somebody out there right now who thinks they have a novel in them. And I was interviewing Tiari Jones a couple weeks ago, and she was saying she thinks it's really not great. All of the people say you have to write every day. You have to do this because there's people out there who are nurses or bus drivers who can't sit down and write every day, but they have fantastic stories to tell.
Yeah. Yes.
So she was like, she thinks that sort of like daily practice is a little bit of a disservice, and it keeps some people out of pursuing their dreams. Mm-hmm. What advice would you give to someone who's working a job or thinks they have a novel in them? How can they get started, and how can they stay motivated?
Yeah, I think it's important to be reading, finding time to read, even if it's not a full book. Maybe it's a short story collection or just a short story. I think that's really important, because I know that motivates me to want to keep writing, is reading all of the amazing things that are coming out and things that came out 50 years ago. It's all connected. It's all going somewhere. We're using that. So I think that's important. And also, I think for me, having someone who is willing to look at some of my pages, just even if it's not the full thing, maybe you wrote the opening to a chapter and you're really proud of it, or you wrote the opening to a chapter and you hate it. I think if you have someone that you trust, that you feel comfortable sharing that with, to give their thoughts and maybe give honest feedback if that's what you want, I think that can go a really long way, because it's important, I think, to have eyes on your work and to see how it is impacting people. But don't let it discourage you. Don't let it discourage you. It's important to keep going.
We're really happy that you kept going. And I have to tell you, not only our book club, I recommended this to 2 other book clubs.
Thank you.
And I know they enjoyed it tremendously. Congratulations, Zakiya. It's an amazing book. We can't wait to watch your adaptation. Everybody, when you're home, give everybody claps at home for Zakiya Dalila Harris. Thank you for being our July authors.
Thank you so much, Allison. And thank you again, everybody, for reading and for hanging out with us tonight.
Well, folks, New York plays an important part in the other Black girl. Nella lives in Bay Ridge, Hazel in Harlem, so she says. So she says she lives in Clinton Hill. So for our guest tonight, we decided to look local too. Madison McFerrin is a Brooklyn-based singer-songwriter and loop artist. Pitchfork said this about her music: an understated, compelling testament to the power and dexterity of the human voice. Another reason she is the perfect person to soundtrack tonight's book club is because it was a debut novel, and Madison's about to have her debut album come out very soon. We'll ask her about that in a second, but first, here is a performance from Madison McFerrin. This is the song Try.
Try and listen, 'cause I might not know what to say. Selfishly I'm worried you might run and hide. Selflessly you're learning, I hold on to pride. No sacrifice comes without mistakes. We could fly, take a leap of faith. It's time to decide. Try. feeling scared, but at least I'm living unprepared to walk away. I won't let the same thing stop us every time. But why is it that changing feels like a goodbye, but no sacrifice comes without mistakes? We could fly, take a leap of faith, look inside, don't you hesitate. We should fly, take a leap of faith. It's time to decide. Try, try, try. What is it you're waiting for? It's time to open up your eyes and see, 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 see. You are what you're waiting for. Just open up your eyes. It's time to see, 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 see. What is it you're waiting for? It's time to open up your eyes and see, see. You are what you're waiting for. Just open up your eyes. It's time to see. It's time to see. It's time to see.
And Madison McFerrin joins us now. Madison, thank you for being with us as part of Get Lit.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Well, first of all, your plants are getting a lot of love.
Thank you. Yes, my partner and I, we recently redecorated, so now I'm in this like lush green space. I appreciate
Looks
it.
good. Looks good. Just had to tell you that. Your plants were getting a lot of shout outs. So that song, Try, I think last time we met, we were actually in person. There was you were playing at a big baby grand piano.
Yeah.
And we were talking about how that song was so much about resilience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious, that was from like 2019.
Right.
How has that song changed for you in the past 2 years, given how we've all had to be so resilient?
Ooh. Well, I will say that over this last year and some change, I definitely have gotten a lot of people who have reached out saying that that song has really helped them through this time period, which has been really amazing. I think it's just a message that everyone needs to hear, be it every day or just like once a month. Sometimes we forget our own self-worth, and being able to draw back on that message, I think, is really important for not just my fans, but also for myself. I wrote the song because I needed to remind myself to try. And I know that I'm not the only person that deals with those kinds of issues. So, I think it's a constant reminder that I can do what I'm trying to do with my life, and not just in my life, but in all situations. So, it means a lot to me. I still try and hold on to that as much as possible.
That's so great that people, that is the kind of song you need during the time we've had. It's kind of, it really is. You were meant to tour. That song's from the EP, You and I know you were meant to tour, but of course the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And during that course of time, a lot of people have really started thinking about their lives and what they do and why they do it. And I'm curious if you had any period of self-reflection about why you make music, and did anything change about the way you thought about you making music?
Oh, totally. So much of my whole perspective on what is necessary for me as an artist to keep going was questioned. You know, like you said, I was supposed to go, I had like 3 tours lined up right when COVID started. And I had been on the road for the majority of 2019 and had finally taken some time off in January and February, and was literally driving like to be on tour when a close friend told my partner and I to turn around and grab as much groceries as possible and stay in our apartment. We had gotten all the way to Richmond, Virginia, and turned around real quick. But, you know, one of the things that I've been super grateful for is because I was forced to stay home and wasn't on the road, I actually got to hone my own production skills, which were something that I was a little intimidated to, no pun intended, try. I didn't necessarily think that I had not the chops for it, but, you know, doing stuff with computers from a musical standpoint, even when I was in college, was always kind of difficult. And so I wrote it off almost. And like my older brother Taylor, who produced that track, he's a producer, and I was like, oh man, I like, if I try, like, I'm not going to be as good as him. But I finally had the opportunity to really, you know, have time to work at it, and it became something that has really pushed me and kept me motivated in this time, because performing live is definitely the thing that I hold nearest and dearest to my heart, and it's where I get so much energy and like spiritual force. And so not having that, I had to search for that in other places. And so learning how to produce ended up being that thing. And even on top of that, you know, one of the things that I really enjoy about playing live shows is connecting with my audience, and not being able to do that was also super tough. And so there were ways that I had to readjust how I was going to be able to do that without getting together with people physically. And so that was another challenge that ended up being super inspiring, because I've actually gotten the chance to get to know fans, albeit virtual. It still has helped me carry on, and has, you know, given me a lot of fortification to be able to continue down this really tricky path. Because, you know, being an artist is already tricky. And so to add this other dimension of like, oh, and we can't play shows, oh, and we can't get together, and all of these things that are so not just innate to human nature, but also like necessary for the art that I make. So being challenged and forced to adapt was, while it's been difficult, it's also been incredibly enlightening. And I think it's pushed me to be a better artist at the end of the day.
So our characters in our book, the other Black girl, they're based in Brooklyn. You are a Brooklyn-based artist. It's one of the first things if someone goes to your website. It says Brooklyn-based artist.
Yeah.
So what does that mean to you, to be a Brooklyn-based artist?
Well, one of the things I think that's really incredible and really beautiful about Brooklyn is there are so many artists. It's so easy to, you know, walk a few blocks and link up with people who make really incredible music or visual art, or they're photographers or directors. I mean, I think that's something that's beautiful about New York City in general. But I think there's something about there's a little bit more of like a relaxed element to Brooklyn than Manhattan. And I think that even shows in the kind of art that I tend to see being made and being exhibited and performed in Brooklyn. And I was actually just talking about this with somebody yesterday. I love going into Manhattan, but I don't think I could live there just because it's on all the time. Obviously, you have your pockets that are a little different, but I love being able to come home in my Brooklyn neighborhood and have a sense of like ease and relaxation that ultimately helps feed my soul, not just for my artistry, but, you know, that's a big part of it.
After not being able to perform for so long, you were able to very recently be on Summer Stage.
Yes.
What was it like?
It was really great. Actually, I was lucky enough to perform at Summer Stage in 2019. So being able to do it again was really great. And also to be able to do it with these incredible Alvin Ailey dancers. It was part of the dance night, and I was the only musician. So to be able to have that in that setting, because my very first show back from COVID was with these 3 dancers as well as 2 more. They choreographed music or pieces to my music up in Harlem on June 9th, and that was really incredible. So to be able to do like a truncated version of that was really great, and the audience was incredible. I mean, one of the things about getting back to live performances right now is everybody is so hungry for them. So like the audiences are just like right there with you, and the energy was really incredible. It definitely helped lift my spirits and like add more fuel to the fire.
I want to ask you about your work on your debut first full-length release. How long has it been in the works? Where are we with it? When do we get it?
Okay, so you'll be getting it in 2022.
Okay, great.
But it, like I said before, with the fact that I've been able to, learn these production skills, where had you asked me a year and a half ago, or even a year ago, what I thought my debut album would sound like, I would probably have to give you the names of a couple producers. But now it's something where like I'm going to be at the helm of a lot of the production, if not all of it. And so that's something that's really, really exciting for me personally, especially being a Black woman artist and producer. There are not a lot of women producers in general in the music industry. And so to know that I'm like taking a step into that is really great. I'm writing some really awesome songs that I'm really proud of. And, there's going to be a whole there is a concept to it, but like y'all ain't getting all that just yet. We got to like tease that out a little more. But I'm really happy with the progress that's being made, and I'm really, really excited to make that official debut. It's a long time coming.
Well, if it's in 2022, then maybe I'll get to talk to you about it in person back at WNYC.
Yeah.
I hope so. We're gonna fingers crossed on that one. You were kind enough to provide us with another performance. I understand this is the first time you've actually performed this song.
Yes.
Tell folks what they're going to hear.
So this is a song that I did. It's a cover of a song called Over the Ocean by a band called Here We Go Magic. There's a record label called Secretly Canadian, and for their 25th anniversary, they are doing a benefit to give money to homeless and houseless people in Bloomington, Indiana. And all of the proceeds from these songs that they're making go directly to that. And this is a song that, when I was trying to redo it in my own style, I started to do some more production stuff, but the vocals that I made and the vocal layers ended up being so lush and haunting that I didn't really want to get in the way of that with, say, some drums or some bass or some other stuff. There's like a low drone that happens, and that's supposed to kind of be like the tide, if that makes sense. But yeah, it was. I don't do a lot of covers, and so it's always an interesting challenge for me to do, especially when it's like, oh, how do I make this my own? And I just released it a couple weeks ago, and yeah, this seemed like the perfect place to play it for the first time.
Well, we're so grateful that you're with us tonight for our Get Lit with All of It book club event. We love to have perfect musicians matched with perfect authors, and I think between the three of us with all this big hair, it just feels like it was the right night.
Yes, I washed it fresh just for this, so
Madison McFerrin, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Here's Over the Ocean.
Over the ocean, reflected voices, satellite message. Isn't it something? The realizing, silver dots marking endless horizon over the ocean. We'll have a vodka. Your card is left open, so nothing can stop you. So far, so good, so nothing can stop you. 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 So far, so good. 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 I am not worried. Some have a fear. The captain has comfort. His voice in mine. What are we doing? When are we standing? Your life may be bumpy, more so than the landing. Over the ocean, so far, so good. So far, so good. So far, so good. Over the ocean, so far, so
Thanks so much to Madison McFerrin for those beautiful performances. And of course, to Zakiya Dalila Harris for being our July Get Lit with All of It book club author for The Other Black Girl. We're going to go to August now. We've got a new book ready to go. I do want to say a couple of thank yous. Thank you to our partners at the New York Public Library, especially Brian Bannon, Tony Marks, and Andrew Medlar. They get those e-copies into the hands of New Yorkers every month. On the Green Space team, they make this whole production look flawless. Jennifer, David, Ricardo, Utski, and Emma. And All of It, Team Get Lit, our producers, Megan Ryan, Jordan Loss, and Simon Close. They work hard on this each and every month. Okay, now it is time to announce our August Get Lit with All of It book club selection. The novel is a take on an American classic, The Great Gatsby, but it turns it completely on its head. We are going to be reading, graphic please, The Chosen and the Beautiful by Nhi Voy. The novel has been named a most anticipated book of 2021 by BuzzFeed, Kirkus, Bustle, USA Today, Oprah Magazine, and many more. In this version of The Great Gatsby, Daisy's socialite friend Jordan Baker is our narrator and protagonist. Just like in the Fitzgerald novel, Baker is wealthy, glamorous, and an excellent golfer. But unlike in Gatsby, this Jordan Baker is queer and a Vietnamese adoptee. Her Asian heritage makes her stand out among all of her white peers. And in this retelling, the world of the rich and privileged isn't just full of champagne and jazz and lavish parties. It's also full of magic. Kirkus calls the novel unique, well-developed, and haunting. To find out, New Yorkers, how to borrow an e-copy from our partners, the New York Public Library, head to wnyc.org/getlit. Get your calendars out, everybody. August 31st at 7 p.m. That's when we'll meet right back here with author Nhi Voy for a virtual book club event. In the meantime, head on over to Instagram. Follow us at All of It WNYC. That's where we hold our book club virtually. In between these live events, we have polls and information, all kinds of good stuff at All of It WNYC. I'm Alison Stewart. I appreciate you watching and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for joining us with Get Lit and happy reading.